All right. So all the stuff is still sitting here from a previous video. And today's question is also from Jan. I went back and I found that I'd been remiss in responding to Jan. Jan's actually made some of the more challenging statements to me, saying I'm wrong about this and that about different people. Not different people, mostly about Ted Seth Jacobs. And I stand to be corrected because what I've seen about Ted Jacobs, apart from what little I saw of him at the Art Students League and was not interested in, has been online. And what I've seen online, it's real. And what he says online, is definitely absolutely not even close to what we're doing in this world that I talk about. It's very different, and the results are different, are plainly different. So the orientation is different, the results are different. The goals are different, frankly. Now, I shouldn't say they're different because I don't even know what people's goals are. I mean, we all fall short, perhaps, of our goals, and yet, so if we're all just trying to be realists, and some found this way and some found that way, I don't know what that means. But among the goals that I had as a student was the desire to be able to, and I felt after hearing the Antaeus story from Gamel, Hercules would wrestle with this human Antaeus, and Antaeus could wrestle him to a standstill. He couldn't beat him until he realized that if you just got Antaeus' feet off the ground a little bit, Antaeus would weaken. And this is a classic art story, and it fits our medium. It's told for us, right? But it's about whether we're living in the art world, which is all above the ground, or whether we're living on earth and in the art world, so our feet firmly planted on the ground. I like to say with our mind and our dreams in the sky, and so I find that a lot of people aren't interested in the same things as me. They actually are following art models in various ways. And I'm not saying anything about TED or anything, I don't know anything about that, but what my point was when studying, I realized that my best way of working, my goal in being a really good student was to be master of whatever I sat down, whatever I sat to paint, anything I found before me, I could reproduce that totally effectively. I could get the proportions, the angles, the shapes, the light effects, the color relations, all that sort of stuff. I could get all of it every time. And predictably. In other words, I wanted to live at a place where everything I did came off my easel was good. And then some of them would be, as Pleisner, I liked what he said. He says, you can do a lot of good work, but every once in a while there's something special that comes out. And I think that's what it takes in our world. You live at a very high place, if you can, and that high place is really high standards, high skill levels. You know what I mean? I'm talking about really good practices and getting proportions, getting angles, getting relationships of every kind, and just being methodical and systematic and good at it. And just doing it well. And that's the planting of your feet on the ground. And dream your dreams. In other words, when you're standing there, Sargent even alludes to or talks about this, that he wants to get himself so practiced in the how-to-dos, and how to be effective at getting what he knows he must get, that he can free his mind to actually be thinking about rhythms and dance and, all those other things or whatever else he's thinking about. Don't suck me into the subject world again. But let me just read the question that comes up from Jan. Jan, just want to add, Ted Jacobs would mention correctly that Impressionists were not painting the accurate hue, value, and chroma of whatever they were painting. Impressionists would paint the shadow quite a bit lighter than it should be, that you can get a more accurate representation if you paint the color darker in the shadows than Impressionists did. And Impressionists painted in a narrower range in the light as well. Now, that's a fascinating little pile of stuff to stir into. Let's start with the beginning, though. That the Impressionists were not painting the accurate hue, value, and chroma of whatever they were painting. So, what were they doing? Which painter actually is painting the accurate hue of the sun hitting say a white cast? Not one, not a single one. In fact, alluded to later by Ted is if you can get a more accurate representation, if you do this and if you do that. More accurate tells you something, doesn't it? We're not talking about accuracy in painting. We're talking about, and there's no truth in terms of this note is that note. And I had some experiences with Gamel that were rather mind-blowing in that way. I mean, at one point, I said to him, I can't hit this note. He says, well, just put the canvas right up next to the wall there, and that's the wall note you're trying to hit, and just paint it till it matches. Now, that implies something about sight sizes that's really sinister, right? Because you can't paint the sun. You could paint that note all day long. But that glare that somebody talked about in one of our videos, that glare off that brassy thing in front of you ain't going to be doing that for bunches of reasons, right? And partially, that you can't paint the sun with the yolk of an egg. So what do we find? What truth is there in painting? What accuracy is there in painting? So it's a really huge question, really important one. What the accuracy is in the relationships, right? So if you have reds and one of them is more warm and one is more blue and another one is something else, and that pile of this one is bigger and that one's a little different size, all those things, those relationships are the absolute truth in painting. I laugh sometimes about Tolstoy. I say laugh, I almost cringe actually, because given that he had a pretty interesting mind in a number of ways. He took Impressionism to be wrong. He said, I don't know if he said it was a sin, but he thought it was problematical because it would make everybody be relativistic, which means they wouldn't believe in absolutes like God. They wouldn't have standards, set standard, wouldn't believe in laws. I mean, like that's what he's implying. And why else would you have a fear of it? But he's worried about people becoming relativistic in their morals. And the fact is that the only truth that we have in painting is relative. The light is light and the dark is dark. I'll make it this, I'll make it that. It can't get any blacker and it can't get any whiter than that, and blah, 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 And so you're stuck in this little world. Well, if the light is light in your picture is actually on a cast that's facing the window, you can't even begin to get as light as just that piece of the cast facing the window when your canvas isn't. So if you understand that, you're already in this place where the only way you can actually, all you can do is allude to nature. All you can do is, I say allude, yet it's not really illusion. It's actually true relationally. And you can make a picture, I mean, like in any rather, as it were, value range. It doesn't have to be really, really dark to light or really, really, it can be shallow as long as the truth of the relationships is there. The one thing you could say about when the Impressionists paint shallow value ranges, as I said, like when you're looking out this window, if you paint this dark here in that window, this is a light and that's a black, and now you got to paint all these values inside here to produce the sense of trees and all the other stuff that's happening out there, and never leave, and never one dark in there that's even close to this dark. So you're left with a really interesting shallow value range. So you can express the truth of that in a shallow range. It's just that you'll have to accept that there's a given, and that is, given the circumstance, then this would be that and this would be that. Well, you can paint outdoors. So when people paint outdoors like that, if they can get really high enough chromas, they can allude to the sun of the day, the brilliance of the day in general. And yeah, we found that it's probably, and he's alluding to that or saying that we found that in fact in the Boston School and a lot of other Impressionists actually do paint darks with a less limited range. In other words, they don't see a reason to limit the range. I mean, and occasionally they do limit the range. But the reason you would do it is because you wanted the general tonality of your picture to be shallow, and because it was more effectively true about what was out there. And you were achieving a lot of what you could do to get the rest of the effects by using qualities of color and chroma and edge, So, but that's a really interesting thing. Don't think it's any different. I mean, I think we're all getting that. It's just that I think you're going to have to, in your own work, or we all have to become, as it were, rather scientific within a framework. In other words, you have to, I just tell students half the time, you're just collating data. You pick this as dark as that, as light. Well, that tells you where everybody else is. They land between this dark and that light. Everybody has to land there. So you're just collating the values, right? And the same thing is true of hues, or the same thing is true of chromas. So you set up your leading chroma and everybody else is below that, right? I mean, that's just setting the, it's anchoring. We call that anchoring, right? But that's what you got to get good at. But what is that? So that's where Gamel says what seeing is. Seeing is seeing the relationships of things. Seeing isn't getting the value of something right, That's sort of the crummy thing about ideas related to sight size. And I'm not saying anybody's worked sight size and then painted on their own for 5 years, it doesn't do sight size anymore, about 90% of the content of their stuff. And even the stuff that they do sight size with that they still believe in, I suggest there are reasons to suspect it. I know that it will affect your proportions and stuff. and you won't even see it. But that's another story. I'm a great friend of sight size, obviously, right? But so let's see. Yeah. So the generalizations about impressionists really aren't useful. There's way too many. I mentioned this in another video. There are way too many kinds of impressionists. I mean, kinds, I shouldn't say that, but there are ranges of impressionists. And the conversation I had in the previous, or another ways back there, was this is an impressionist painting. And yet the value of that dark is about as dark as you'll see in any of your still lifes. I mean, it's pretty close to black. So, and does it actually diminish the quality of the light? No, that's actually your job, is to figure out, whether you should use that dark or not, based on what it does, whether it gives you the envelope you're looking for. If it doesn't, then you'll adjust. You'll try other things. As I said, the whole impressionist mindset is a search, but it's a search for relationships that produce effects. One thing I didn't mention in this conversation yet, though, is the whole idea of it's not just value ranges and that sort of thing, but it also, a lot of people fail to realize that it's about effects, what's happening at points where dark meets a light, where actually light, as it were, glows or projects. And part of the projection, which people don't understand, is caused by the sharpness of the edge. Part of that sense to your eye of it jumping off the wall is because it's so much sharp. So it's such a sharp contrast. Soft ones don't tend to do that. They tend to sort of glom onto the wall or sort of hang on a bit to it. Be the same thing as my hand over. It's fuzzier on this side. It's a slurred edge. It tends to not jump off the wall like I'll bet you would see that finger does, right? If you can let yourself see them both at once, you'll see one of them is nearer you, so to speak. By the way, that's a whole big discussion about visual order. There is an actual visual order. It has everything to do with nearness to your eye. And I know there are painters out there who deny that there's such a thing. They just haven't experienced it and haven't used it yet successfully. But anyway, that's that one. I've spent 12 minutes on that. I can't believe I did that. All right, well, good. And so I thank you, Jan, very much for these questions, and I hope I haven't been redundant, but I just didn't feel like I'd done justice to that or the other one. So, all right. Thank you very much. Please do further comments, questions, challenge me. I don't mind. And, I'm not so insecure that if I'm wrong, actually, I won't admit it. And if you're wrong, I will continue the conversation in a polite way. So, or if you're somebody you like to quote is wrong. But anyway, share, subscribe, like, especially, or don't like. It's all fine. And but good luck in your painting evolution. I gotta say this, actually. I got a very nice note from somebody today who's been watching. I've been watching your videos, and I have to admit to being gobsmacked. I still don't know precisely what that means. I think that's a 60s or 70s term. But I like that, though. I mean, I hope so. I mean, especially if somebody's been studying painting for a while and they think, what the heck is this? I've never heard it like this before. I mean, I'm not just trying to be weird and different, guys. Believe me, the foundations for what I'm talking about are good. My work is better than it's ever been. It's because of these foundations. But it's also, the fact is, I find the correlations why I can even talk to you about Sargent and compare them is because I've fully, I've invested myself in working through this stuff, not just talking about it or being a scholar and looking at it in books. So, but there's a whole deep discussion. And all of this, the depth of this stuff is there because of the speech of I've mentioned it before. Painters have spoken. There's like a scripture of painters, and it's a quote here and it's a quote there, but they're gold nuggets, and they like line the streets, and nobody picks them up. Anyway, look forward to talking to you another time. Stay on it. It's a fantastic, rich field that pays and makes your life even worth more, especially as you make other people's lives worth more. So good. Talk to you next time.